Burnout is a common experience for many attorneys and other high-performing professionals. What causes burnout and how do we overcome it? Is it simply working too hard, or is there a deeper meaning? Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Lawyer Millionaire Podcast. I'm your host, Darren Wurz, financial advisor for law firm owners. I'm thrilled you chose to join us for today's conversation. Our guest today is someone very special, and I got to meet her just a few weeks ago at the ABA GP Solo Conference in Kansas City, which was awesome. And she has dedicated her career to the betterment of the legal profession. She's a veteran attorney turned coach, specializing in lawyer burnout. With her unique understanding of the legal field and its challenges, Karen McClure has become a trusted guide for many attorneys dealing with burnout, procrastination, and perfectionism. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this. I think I've struggled with this myself, so I'm hoping you can give me some pointers too today.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's kick it off by just sharing a little bit about your background as an attorney and what led you to becoming a lawyer burnout coach.
Yeah. So I started practicing law in 2006, and I went into work with my dad, which definitely was not the career path that I anticipated. But I worked with him for several years under his wing and mentorship. And then in 2013, well, let me go back a little bit. Actually, in 2011, 12, my mom had breast cancer. And then immediately on the heels of that, my dad was diagnosed with cancer as well.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and add to that, my husband and I were expecting our second child. So it was a period of immense stress, to say the least.
Absolutely.
My dad had made me a partner in the firm after I had worked with him for a few years. And so I was kind of learning the ropes at that time. And he was out of the office a lot for my mom's chemo and then for his own treatment. And then as his health declined and we had a newborn, I did a little bit of soul searching at that time.
Yeah.
So after he passed away that year and my husband and I took over the firm, it was the most difficult chapter in my life. We had a 6-month-old, we had a firm that we didn't really know how to run, and neither of us really enjoyed being attorneys. So I started kind of looking around for other things that I could do to make myself feel better. I did a lot of yoga and meditation, which I think is something that is really common. When we look at the wellness initiatives in the legal profession, they suggest those two things specifically. And they definitely helped, but it wasn't quite enough. And I was looking around in the personal development world for what can I do? What kind of side hustles, can I try so I can transition out of practicing law? So I tried a few different things over the last few years, and ultimately I started working with a business coach. And that was when I first started to understand what coaching is, because I think that a lot of us have heard of life coaches and executive coaches and things like that, but it's such a new profession that as attorneys, we may not really know exactly what that is. So I'm getting a little bit long-winded here, but that was my introduction to the coaching world.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think you're the only burnout coach that I know. I think it is a very new and specialized area. And I am seeing a lot more focus on attorney wellness. And so I think this is the right time for someone like you to come along and be able to help other people. So it sounds like you had a lot going on. I mean, obviously a lot of stressors, and not just, you know, being an attorney, but having to step into the shoes of running a firm and then all of your life circumstances happening at the same time. Was that the underlying cause of burnout? Just all of those things happening for you? Or, you know, what was really define how burnout kind of exhibited itself in your life?
Yeah. So for me, it showed up in my profession as an attorney because and not just when I was running the firm, but it really started rearing its head after that, because just the volume of things that you have to deal with as an attorney, right? So you've got clients, you've got, if you're a solo or small firm practitioner, then you have a whole business to run, which is not a skill that they teach you in law school. So we had to learn that. And then, and I think this is the case for every attorney, not just small firm lawyers, just being the rainmaker, right?
Right.
And dealing with other attorneys and the lack of professionalism that we're starting to see so much of. And the demand on your time and the demand on your energy. And it's difficult for people to be able to balance all that. I hate that word balance, but to manage all of the expectations that are on us as attorneys. And so
Yeah.
that, I think, is how it started showing up for me. And I see that showing up for my clients too.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's define this, because I mean, how do you know when you're burned out? I mean, maybe we're like, someone's thinking, well, I'm not really excited about work. I'm really stressed, but I don't know, when do I know when I'm at that burnout stage? Like, what are some key indicators to look for?
That is a great question, because I think there's a big difference between stress and burnout. And I'll take a second too. Stress is something that shows up in the way that we feel. It's not something that's outside of us. And then as you continue to feel that stress, that's when it leads to burnout. So when you have continuous stress in your career, that's when it leads to burnout. Okay. And it's actually something that has been more psychologically defined lately as work related. And so as you continue to expose yourself to these stressors, then you start to feel physical sensations of burnout, like lack of energy, inability to sleep, lack of engagement. And it's the similarity to depression is something that people bring up, but it's more episodic. But if you continue it over time, it'll lead to more adverse health effects.
Oh, wow.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy that it can really exhibit itself for you, not just mentally, but physically. That's a strange and weird phenomenon to me. But great that we have that ability to maybe see some of those clues in our lives, like lack of energy and some of those other things we might experience. Let's kind of go ahead. Sorry.
I think, and one of the big things that we really see is the withdrawal from social situations, right? And so when you're starting to feel that way, we feel often like we're a failure or like we're just not doing a good enough job. So we don't want to be around people. We don't want to bring in the new business. We don't want to go to the social events that are so crucial to, networking and bringing in business.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe you feel like you're not doing a good enough job for your clients, and you feel like, oh my gosh, all my clients hate me. They're not happy.
That's
Is
right.
that something that might experience?
Yeah, and that imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a big one for a lot of professionals for sure. So what are, is it just the busyness of being an attorney? You mentioned some other things as well. that might be factors or causes here of burnout? What are some of the big things that cause burnout for attorneys that you have seen, or especially for law firm owners?
We place expectations on ourselves. So when people go to law school, they don't do it because they expect something easy. We as attorneys are type A people. We're used to being, in the top of the class. We're used to working really hard to achieve our goals, and we're used to seeing results. And it's almost like a formula. And so I think, when you place that kind of level of expectation on this is how my life is going to go, and it doesn't necessarily work out that way, it starts to weigh on you. And then you start looking for other, for other things that you can do to make yourself feel better. We work harder. We don't address the underlying emotional issues that are happening when we don't meet our expectations.
That's fascinating. So there's almost a mental shift that we need to go through in that process. Is
That's
that
right.
something that you help clients with?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So when I help clients, there are a couple of different things that I help with. One of them is dealing with their nervous system and resetting that. Because when you're in a constant state of stress, your nervous system is on high alert, right? So we all have heard about fight or flight, and there's also freeze. And that's what's happening. We're trying to get away from this perceived threat or, just freezing. And that's when we kind of like go more inward and withdrawal. You see things like that. But so I help establish a sense of safety with our nervous system. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that once we can establish that sense that everything is okay and we're not in danger, there's no real threat, then we start to look at our thought processes and what has led us to feel this way. Because we know from cognitive behavioral therapy that our thoughts are what make us feel, certain emotions and what lead to certain actions, like working harder or drinking more or laying on the couch under the blanket watching Netflix all day, whatever it is for you.
Right. Yeah, I find that very interesting that a lot of this, not that it's our fault, but that it kind of stems from our expectations that we kind of burden ourselves with. That's I mean, it's interesting. It also provides a lot of hope, because it's like, hey, if I can correct those, if I can establish kind of a new way of thinking, maybe I can deal with this a lot better.
That's right. Yeah. And that I think is really good news for most people, because when you're in a state of overwhelm or burnout, then you think it's going to be like this forever. And, I think that there's a perception for attorneys that that's just part of the job, that feeling that way is just what it is. And what I hope to do is to overcome that perception and to show people you can still be successful as an attorney. You don't have to feel terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about you're running a law firm and dealing with teams or with employees. Are there strategies that law firm owners can use to kind of maybe detect burnout in their teams and maybe try to help prevent that from occurring?
Yes, because it definitely does show up with our legal assistants and paralegals as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, everything, it goes from the top down. So if I am placing expectations on my paralegal to get things done under deadlines and really quickly, or if I am bad at managing my time and then I go to my paralegal and say, you got to get this done right now, then of course that's going to cause some stress and frustration with that person as well. So I mean, I think that just having some good time management skills is vital. And knowing what our boundaries are, um, that's something that we really need to work on too.
Oh, boundaries.
Yeah, it's a hot topic these days, I think.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. What role does boundary setting play in preventing burnout?
Oh my gosh. I think that is the first step. So when people think about
Hmm.
boundaries, we think we're trying to control other people and other people's behavior, which you can't. So what a boundary is if you do X, I will do Y. And it's not easy. And as we're recording this, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. I think that's been coming up a lot for people. If you talk about this, then I will, walk away as an example. But, in a law firm setting, we have to think about that in terms of our clients. Something came up recently, how do you deal with clients texting you at all hours of the night? Well, you have to set that boundary at the beginning.
Hmm.
If you text me after 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I will not respond until the next day. Simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Setting expectations for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Are there some other practical things that law firm owners can do? Tips or tricks you might have for avoiding getting to that burnout place?
I think aside from setting boundaries, I talk about time management a lot because it's something that goes by the wayside. We have a tendency to just get into the office and say, what's in front of me today?
Hmm.
But having a plan that you're going to stick with as best as you can, because I know that things come up and we have to fight fires. But having a plan to stick with is so good for helping what's coming up and how you're going to handle it. And then, sometimes we're able to say, okay, this fire needs fighting right now, but I can shift what I'm working on to another time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you become more productive that way. And
That's
speaking of
right.
productivity, I'm curious, I suspect that burnout leads to procrastination. Is that
Yeah.
a correct thing? Can you tell us
Oh,
about
yeah.
that?
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, if you're in a place where you're feeling emotionally exhausted and drained, then when something big comes up, if you've got a brief or you've got a deadline, it's like, I don't have the energy to do this right now. And I mean, we talked about the health problems that are a result of burnout, but I mean, that can lead to some professional problems too, And
Hmm.
I was reading the ABA journal this morning and I saw a lawyer that he got in trouble for basically missing deadlines and said, well, I have a lot of stuff going on, and that
Hmm.
doesn't fly.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How about you've been working with law firm owners. Is there a great story you can tell us of someone you've worked with, obviously protecting their identity, but can you give us an example of maybe a success story?
Yeah, so I one of the things that I've recently worked with somebody on is she wanted to stop drinking so much. And that's an
Hmm.
issue in our profession that starts from law school on, all of the parties that we have with open bars. And if you're somebody who's really stressed out, that is your coping mechanism. And so I helped her with that. I helped her overcome um, over drinking by helping her figure out the reason why she felt like she needed to. So
Hmm.
that was a really interesting situation that I helped with recently.
Yeah, yeah. And what a great um, real life impact to have in someone's life.
Yes.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. That really was helpful to her.
Great. Now, I imagine when people are thinking about working with you, maybe they have some objections. Maybe they're like, oh, I don't really need a burnout coach. I can manage this on my own. How do you, encourage people to engage with you or maybe overcome some of those common objections that attorneys might have?
Yeah, we're used to being able to solve problems for everybody, and we think we can solve our own problems. But the problem with that is if you could have fixed it, you probably would have by now. And that's a little bit of tough love, but it's always a good idea to have somebody to lean on. And I work with attorneys on their time schedule as well. So I have a few different options that people can work with me. We have one-off sessions. So if there's something that's really, weighing on your mind, we can work on that. And then we've got packages as well. But as far as being able to fix it yourself, one thing that I would tell attorneys is that I think that we can solve our problems ourselves, sure, but are you willing to put in the time? Because our most valuable asset that we have as humans is time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I can do for you is show you an outside perspective and identify things quicker than you usually can from the inside. And that'll save you time so that you can do the things that are more important to you.
Yeah. And sometimes we just need that extra person to kind of push us along. I imagine if you're procrastinating, because you're burned out, you're probably procrastinating about addressing your burnout in the first
That's
place.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Karen, do you have kind of a process that you go through with folks when they're working with you? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do. So I talked about it a little bit with the nervous system, and that I think is the very foundation that we have to work on and figuring out where you are in that. So the first thing that I will help you do is to just show you some strategies. So when you are feeling that, that sense of overwhelm and stress, you can calm down a little bit and just know that it's okay, that you're safe, that, that there's nothing that you need to worry about. And then from there, we can address the thought process. So the biggest thing that we do is to identify what subconscious beliefs are holding you stuck in these patterns. So what are you thinking that's causing you to feel overwhelmed, stressed out, drained, whatever you want to call it? And then why do you feel that way? And so we sort of just explore that and go from there. So I'm not by any means saying, well, everything's going to be okay, just move on from here, or just, you should think about it this way, or whatever, look on the sunny side. We have to become aware of what we're thinking that's causing the results that we have right now, so that we can move to a place where you're able to reform your beliefs and your actions and change where you are.
Yeah, that sounds great. Absolutely. And I think this is such a critical topic because it affects everything. It affects your prosperity. It affects your success. I mean, if you're burned out, it's going to be very hard for you to scale your practice, to be that rainmaker, to bring in new business, and to get new clients and to serve your existing clients well, so that they'll refer other people to you. So that's why we're talking about this on this show.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're not able to focus, if you don't have any energy, then you are not being the best advocate for your clients.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Karen, we're coming down to the end of our time here. I've got one more big question for you. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
And the question is, what is your millionaire mission? And what I mean by that is, what's your big driving force behind the work that you do? Maybe it's a goal you're trying to achieve, a retirement vision or something. What is your big why for why you do the stuff you do?
My big why is that over the years of practice, I have seen so many attorneys who are unhappy with the practice of law in general, unhappy with their clients, unhappy with other lawyers. And I believe that we can change the legal culture, and it takes one person at a time.
Absolutely. I love that, Karen. That's great stuff. Well,
Thanks.
I imagine people may have questions about this. And if they do, how can they find you if they want to learn more?
So I'm on all of the social media channels. You can find me on LinkedIn, Karen McClure, on Instagram at Karen McClure Coaching, and you can email me or visit my website, KarenMcClure.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Karen, for being with us today.
Thanks.
And and sharing your insights with us. And thank you, the listener, for joining us today as well. Cultivating a thriving firm and nurturing your team's well-being goes hand in hand with improving your financial success. And that's what we're all about. If you found today's episode enlightening, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. We appreciate your support. Until next time, I'm Darren Wurz, wishing you a prosperous journey as you navigate the complex world of money and law firm ownership. Remember, you're not alone in your pursuit of success. We're always here, ready to guide and support you. To learn more, please visit thelawyermillionaire.com.